Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's presentation. We're so excited to welcome you to our professional panel on UCB Working from Home Workplace Accessibility for People with Disabilities. I do want to give a quick notice as people are joining us that this meeting is being recorded, so just take note of that. We will ask that everyone keep their videos off for the duration of today's presentation so that we can focus on our slides and our wonderful panelists. So before we get started, I'm just going to go ahead and make sure our screen is shared. We are now sharing. And our first panelist, which will be broken up, and I'll give just a quick overview of the format. Each of our four panelists today will be chatting and sharing information with us for about 25 minutes or so. We'll then do an individual Q&A for about 10 minutes immediately following each of those presentations. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker and presenter, Derek Coates, who is the manager of the Disability Program Access and Compliance here at UC Berkeley.
Hi, everyone. My name is Derek Coates, and as she said, I'm the manager of Program Access here in the Office of Disability Access and Compliance. I would first like to acknowledge the families of the more than 225,000 people that have died from COVID-19. Secondly, I want to acknowledge the 30-year anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act is this year. And this is actually National Disability Employment Awareness Month. In May 2019, the Chancellor responded to a call for changes in our campus values and how we value diversity and inclusion on our campus. Her statement was in response to a number of issues that had been raised by people on the campus about access regarding disability services, regarding inclusion and diversity efforts, and challenges to our campus-built environment. These values were officially ratified by the development of a campus plan that included an FTE investment, changes in messaging, the initiation of a new transition plan, and a self-evaluation, along with a number of other positive projects. Many of the goals set forth in that May 19th announcement have resulted in successful projects. Okay. Excuse me for a moment here. The Chancellor and many of those working in the background in support of the leadership have demonstrated that much hoped for and welcome ideal we know of as integrity. Thank you for your leadership, Chancellor. Okay, now I'd like to turn to the Staff Alliance for Disability Access. I want to give a special thanks to the leadership of the organization. Their efforts have resulted in a number of different advances on the campus in terms of increasing awareness to staff with disabilities on the disability accommodations process, as well as increasing awareness of how disability is thought of on our campus. This event shows how the university can help one another be well at work and achieve our goals in the workplace, and also contribute to the mission of the university in teaching, research, and public service. So what is this landscape I'm talking about? Our adventure begins with centering us in the center of requesting accommodations if we need them. First step is to identify what kind of resources exist, who are the people on this campus neighborhood, and how can they assist me in helping with my decision-making regarding performing the essential functions of my job. So it's important to think about the roles of the people that we will encounter on this landscape. Obviously, one of the roles, and so what this does is this situates the people who are presenting today. In other words, the first step might be ergonomics, how we interface with our computer, how we interface with our workstation. Not everybody's home is amenable to a workstation, and it is critical to take action to purposefully adapt to the new reality. Don't wait until pain comes before you get the support that you need. And I would implore you to look at the many resources on the UHS website for ergonomics. They are invaluable in moving forward. The second step in the process is the supervisor or manager. So once the staff person determines that, hey, I might need an accommodation, how do they do that? The how-to of that is that they request the accommodation from their manager/supervisor. Um, you don't have to say, I have a disability, I want a disability accommodation. What you can do is you can determine what accommodations might assist you in performing those essential functions of that job, and then communicate that to the supervisor. This begins what's known as the interactive process. And it's great to think about this like it's a tennis match or tennis game, a friendly tennis, of course, where you have one person who is requesting the accommodation, and then that ball is served into the far court, and then the person hits the ball back into the near court. And so the request for accommodation goes through, the supervisor responds to the request, and then the two parties engage in the interactive process where they actually interactively mutually agree and negotiate upon the accommodations that might be effective in mitigating whatever barriers the employee might encounter. Once those accommodations are implemented, then obviously we want to make sure that we check in to see how they're going. Disabilities are not static. Sometimes a disability may impact a person one way in the morning and one way in the evening, or one way in 1 month or for a series of days and then be gone for a period of time. So it's definitely intermittent in terms of its impact. So we need to be mindful of the fact that this isn't the end all be all. It's the case that we are actually interactively trying to move through and understand how to best allow the employee to perform the essential functions of their job and contribute to the unit. And there are plenty of information resources available about the interactive process, most of which I want to point out is in our PPSM 81. It's actually a beautiful description of how this is supposed to work. And when you read it, you will see what I mean by a tennis match. I also greatly appreciate the enforcement guidance from the EEOC on disability accommodations, because that enforcement guidance provides vignettes that walk a person through what questions to ask, what things they should be thinking about, how things are supposed to work. So it really helps if you understand what the gestalt is supposed to be, then you sort of get a sense of when it's not working in the direction that you would want it to work in. The next group of people that you will encounter is our people in culture business partners. And they are sort of like, you can consider them to be like concierges in a way, in terms of having an understanding of the different roles and the different procedures and processes that get initiated upon an accommodation request. So their support is invaluable. They provide support to both the employee and to the supervisor in terms of engaging in that interactive process and successfully coming up with accommodations that might work. The next group of people that you would encounter would be called the disability managers. They are the walking encyclopedias. I mean, that's my coin. I believe that that is the case of the policy when it comes down to workplace accommodations. And they have a unique role, which Mary will describe later, but they're confidential. So the staff person can go to them and say, hey, this is what's going on in my workplace, and I'm not really sure what to do. How do I go about having these discussions, what's supposed to happen, so they can get an understanding of the entire landscape when it comes down to what to do when an accommodation is needed. In addition, a staff person can go to them and talk to them about it in a confidential manner. And this is very helpful at times. Disability accommodations can be complex. Disabilities don't act the way you want them to most times. And so having a resource on campus to talk through how is that disability or the symptoms or the manifestation of it creating barriers to access? How is the actual environment itself, or even the workplace, or even the job duties, are they creating barriers to the person's ability to perform those tasks? So the disability managers are invaluable in providing that kind of guidance and forethought in terms of what to do when, and also play a role in when the employee is engaged in the actual interactive process. And so what would I tell people who are beginning to engage in this process? One of the first things that we need to do is educate ourselves. It would be a great idea to go and try to find out what kind of accommodations might fit with the disability that I am experiencing. Um, and so I'll give you an example of myself. When I changed jobs along many years ago, I had sight at the time, even though I knew my vision was going. And then when my vision eventually did go, then I had to think differently about how I was interface with my equipment and the job duties and tasks that I had to perform. And so part of that was me finding out what kind of accommodations would help me in doing so. I visited this organization called the Job Accommodations Network, the Department of Labor. And the Job Accommodations Network was set up to assist federal agencies in implementing the ADA when it comes down to how to engage in the interactive process, what kind of accommodations match with what kinds of disabilities, et cetera. And so any employee can go onto that website and click on their disability, and they can read about a number of different accommodations that a person with that disability has requested in the workplace. Now, certainly all of those accommodations may not apply to this particular person's case, but there may be other options that the person did not think of. And so that education piece is really critical. And you don't, I'm not saying you need to spend years doing it, but you have resources on our campus with the disability managers, you have resources with the Job Accommodations Network. And in both instances, you can talk through what is the best decision that will enable me to continue to perform the essential functions of my job. Um, so at the end of the day, it's about understanding what this landscape looks like, understanding what are the options that are available to you, understanding how to go about initiating the process, what your role is in the process, what the expectations are, not only of yourself in terms of your performance in terms of these accommodations, but also the expectations of the manager slash supervisor. When it comes down to the actual implementation of the accommodations, be aware that you may try accommodation number 3 and 4 on your list, and it may turn out to be that they really don't work, or they're not as effective in mitigating the barrier as much as you would like to. And there's nothing wrong with going back to the drawing board and reviewing and looking again at, okay, what is it that can assist me in doing this? When I became blind, it wasn't that I couldn't do the essential functions of the job. I can read, I can interview people, I could, with the right assistive technology and training, interface with my computer. So it wasn't about my ability to not do the job. It was about the interface and how to sort of find a way to mitigate that interface that allows me to be gainfully employed, and at the same time enjoy what it's like to work in a workplace where my work is respected, where I am respected, and my disability is not considered a liability, but is valued and championed. And so that's why I wanted to start with talking about all the efforts that the chancellor and has initiated in moving the campus forward over the last year or so, and making sure that resources are allocated, and making sure that training and education is also a critical part of how we move forward. The last thing I want to talk about is an example of what that looks like. So currently what we are doing is we are engaging in creating a transition plan and conducting a self-evaluation. And that transition plan involves people going throughout the entire campus and measuring everything that can be measured: slopes, width of doors, height of a sink in a bathroom, everything, and confirming whether or not those measurements are consistent with the ADA guidelines and whether the university is in compliance with those guidelines. And at the end of that process, then everything will be evaluated, and we will have we will be able to identify what things need to be fixed. The same thing is taking place with the self-evaluation. And I've spent the last 6 months talking to executive leadership, deans, control unit heads, and briefing them on the surveys that we distributed to all of these units. And in these surveys, what we did was we itemized all of the compliance and accessibility guidelines from the federal guidelines, and asked people whether or not they follow these guidelines in their practice, when they participate in activities or sponsor activities, sponsor events, sponsor programming, and use our facilities as well as utilize our services. And so both of these major projects will be completed next year, but they move our campus much further in our ability to provide for all of the people on our campus that visit and attend our events and use our facilities, as well as those who work on our campus and come to our campus to be educated. So that's the conclusion of my words, and I will pitch it back to you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Derek, for that great overview. And I should have mentioned it before, but we do have a chat box. And so now's our time where if anyone has any specific questions for Derek, anything Derek shared, please feel free to go ahead and add your questions into the chat, and I will go ahead and read them aloud for all of us to be able to hear and appreciate, and then I'll turn over to Derek for response. So I'll give us just 1 or 2 moments to go ahead and type, just because I didn't give anyone a heads up. Let's see, and we'll wait just another moment to see if we have any specific questions for this portion of our presentation. All right. Well, Derek, I think it sounds like you gave such a thorough presentation. All the questions may have been addressed already ahead of time.
I love it. That's what we're here for, to just educate and learn too. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Derek. We appreciate it. All right. We're going to get ready for our next upcoming presentation. And this will be from Mary, who is a vocational rehabilitation counselor and disability specialist in Be Well at University Health Services. And so, Mary, I will turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. I do work in disability management in Be Well at Work. We're branded Be Well at Work, and we live at University Health Services, or better known as the Tang Center. So that's where we hang out. Um, I was caught a little bit by surprise because I thought our order of presentation was a little different. So do excuse my sort of shock at the moment, but it's okay. I'm gonna get right back on track. So a little bit about me. I've been on the campus here now. This is October 21. Yesterday was my anniversary date. Been on the campus for 6 years. Prior to that, I did disability management at UC Davis for 2.5 years. I want to throw a disclaimer out right now. It seems that the gardeners know what day I'm doing a presentation, so you might hear some leaf blowing and whatnot. I do apologize for the background noise. Um, so, in my role in disability management, what I strive to do is help facilitate return to work, um, stay at work, accommodations. I answer questions. I'm a liaison sometimes between the employee and the department when there's difficulty. I'm a confidential resource for the employees, and that includes staff and faculty and our students who are employed. Um, and in my role, I leverage some of the tools that I've learned in counseling as a vocational rehab counselor. So we look at potentials. A lot of our supervisors, managers, and our staffs have a very narrow view of what their vocational landscape looks like. And I've been trained and I'm pretty adept at broadening that view. So in terms of what we do for accommodation in context here, the first thing that would be required, and I think Derek spoke to it, is the recognition that something needs to happen. You're having some sort of difficulty. There's some, it may not even be great, but it's starting to be a problem. Something about your own health, injury, your level of wellness is impeding your ability to do the essential functions of your job. In that case, like Derek did state, nobody's waiting for magic words. I do hereby request a formal accommodation for my disability needs. It's not that necessary. We don't need perfect language. What we do need is, you know what? I think I need some assistance. I'm not sure what I need, but I think I need something. That's all we need. That's where I start. Okay. And you could ask that of your supervisor. In fact, that's the best place to go. But if you're not comfortable, you also have resources in people and culture. That would be your HR business partner, perhaps someone in EL&R, an employee relations person, okay, or a peer. I'm not sure where to go. And they could point you in the right direction as a resource. Anyone can start the conversation. And going forward, the conversation that I'm referencing is called the interactive process. Um, Not everybody necessarily will need an accommodation. However, when the question comes up, if disability or some sort of illness or process is impeding someone's progress, we're going to have the discussion. And the discussion is a robust and um, plain um, and timely discussion about what might be needed. I understand, Mary, that you're having difficulty walking. This looks new. Is there anything I can do for you? Okay, somebody's going to ask you those questions. And then we sit down either one on one or in a group. Doesn't have to be a large production, but you do get to have whomever helps you feel comfortable at your discussion. So that might be a union representative, it might be your spouse or your partner, it may be just a good friend who you rely on for support, or maybe no one at all. It's your um, process, okay? The other part of the process is your participation. What you bring to the table is vital to the discussion, because what we're trying to discover is what you may need to be able to do the essential functions of your job. Now, currently in our work environment, pandemic environment, um, someone coined, and I don't know exactly who it was, coined the terms COVID work assignment. We're in a COVID work assignment presently. Our regular work for very many of us doesn't look like it typically does. Okay, so in this COVID work assignment, and while we're working from home or working in different offices, we might need some things. We might not know what those things are, or we may very well know what those are. So, in terms of things like furniture, um, software, computer equipment, those are things that you are able to ask for. Some might fall under office logistics, and then others might fall under that umbrella of accommodation. So let's talk about what an accommodation might look like. An accommodation might be any type of augmentation or modification to your work site or your work situation. Okay, again, adding software, adding a different kind of mouse, um, or implementing a strategy that's going to assist you in remaining well. For example, getting up, stretching, moving, not staying static. And I know Greg's going to say a lot more about that. So how do we come to an accommodation? So I raised my hand that's just a relative term, raised my hand and said, I think I need something. And in the conversation, that interactive process, we've discovered that I am limited in my ability to do X, Y, and Z. Now, I've spoke to it, but perhaps we need something to support that need, right? And in that regard, I'm talking about something from your health provider, whatever provider that is. And the information that we need is something that speaks to your functional limitations and restrictions. How are you limited? What can you do? What can't you do? At what duration? I'm sorry, what frequency and for what duration? How long are you under this limitation? What we don't need is your diagnosis. Please keep that to yourself. That's your personal health information. We do not need your prognosis, how you're going to fare at the end of your treatment. That's none of our business as well. And I know a lot of times we become very familiar with each other and we like to share, but I want to let you know that that still remains your personal health information and you should guard it the way you guard your credit card number. Okay? Okay, so we get something from the doctor, and the doctor says Mary's limited in her ability to walk and stand to so many hours per shift. What happens now? What happens is you sit down with your supervisor sits down and preps for the meeting, and they look at your job description and the associated PIM form. And the PIM is an acronym for the physical, environmental, and mental aspects of your job. Okay. Um, your In that case, we take a look at what the doctor said you're limited in doing. Okay. And then we look at the PIM. How frequently are you tasked to stand, walk, lift, carry, bend, stoop, crawl, any of those things? And then we make a decision. Is, first of all, is an accommodation necessary? Okay. If I'm limited in my ability to stand and walk, however, um, we're looking under the category of grip grasp. In that particular area, an accommodation is not necessary. Now, if my ability to stand walk is limited to, let's say, 6 hours per day, and the associated PIM says that the frequency that I would be tasked to walk stand is between 4 hours and 6 hours a day, then the answer is yes, I may need an accommodation. Once we discover that an accommodation is necessary, then we seek to discover what type of an accommodation can be made. Okay. Um, I like to let people know that there are resources. Jan is the job accommodation network. See, anybody can be a voc rehab counselor. It does take some training. Um, so at that resource, it's run by the Department of Labor. It's an exhaustive resource for potentials for accommodation and a lot of other things. And you can look up potential accommodations by disability, by job title, by symptomology. Okay, there are voc rehab counselors tasked to run that site, and I'm not sure how they're working right now in the pandemic, but that you can get a live person to answer the phone and help you with a specific question. And the reason I reference this resource is because sometimes you go, I don't even know what I need, right? I don't even know what I need. This is a good place to start. What it is not is um, a legal repository. It's not, I found this on Jan and you must give it to me. No, this is part of the interactive process. This is what you're bringing to the table and what your supervisor or the group is bringing to the table. And we kind of work it out, try it out, see what works, and then implement it. Okay. Let's see. Work status notes. Work status notes are difficult. They're difficult for you to read most times. They're difficult for supervisors to read sometimes. And I would even venture to say that sometimes a doctor can't read what they wrote. But it is an integral piece if we're talking about an accommodation. An accommodation is medically driven, or some sort of documentation is needed from a provider. That's not the be all and end all, and especially in this COVID environment, we're having similar conversations about accommodation in COVID land. But right now, I'm just keeping this line. We're on one side of the line, and that's those accommodations that are medically driven. Okay. So we've discovered that you need an accommodation. We've had a good conversation and we've discovered that there are some things that you think might work for you. Okay. And so the question now is, what do we implement? So you get to put in your input, and it is important. Your supervisor or the team gets to put in their input. At the end of the day, however, and based upon the business need, the accommodation or the features of the accommodation are ultimately decided by the department. Okay. Your input is valuable, and I like to get in there too if there's any kind of difficulty. I am a confidential resource. You can come to me, talk to me. Well, you can't literally come to me right now, but you can certainly hit me in the email and we can set up a video chat and talk about how it is your your job is being negatively impacted, what you think you might need, what's worked, what hasn't worked before. Okay. So we've set it on the fact that you have a need, we've identified it needs to be accommodated, and we've decided, yes, we can accommodate. And now we implement. You will be asked at the time of implementation to sign a document. Now, you can choose to sign it or not sign it. There's all kinds of myths out there about what happens when you sign this document. It's a transitional work agreement, and all it really does is um, verify that the university has agreed to accommodate you. Your department has agreed to accommodate you for some duration, and you will not be asked to work outside your specified limitations. But here's the rub: you have responsibility as well. And you are to keep yourself within your limitations and restrictions, meaning don't volunteer to do something that's outside your restrictions. If you show up to your work site and it doesn't appear that you'll be able to do the work given your restrictions, your first step is to ask the question to your supervisor or whomever's in charge, how's this going to go today? Not, I'm not going to do this. There's no way I can do this. But certainly you want to ask, I'm not sure how this is going to work today. Are you aware of my limitations? Could be that the staff, the supporting staff that you needed is just not in the area at the time, but there's a plan for it. So you would always make sure, just like when you're typically working, that you have all your supplies in place. Same thing. You need to be ready to work. Okay. And then we put your hand to task. We try it. Okay. No accommodation is one and done. Once in a while, we implement something and it works out beautifully, and you start to heal up, and the restrictions are lessened. And before you know it, you're back to regular work, your typical baseline. And it's awesome. Sometimes the accommodation doesn't work so well. And so what do? We go back to the drawing board. We go back to the table. We might augment something, add a few things, subtract a few things. We do what we need to do. We keep having the conversation until we get it right. And then when everything is beautiful in terms of what you need to get your work done, the expectation is that you would produce as per usual while you have the opportunity to heal and continue working. So that's the quick and dirty of it. I don't know if that's the best term, but that's what I just did. And there's a lot there's a lot of complexities to this piece, but it's not always difficult, and it's not always expensive. People worry that their accommodation is going to cost money. But the truth is, most of the accommodations, and I think the last time I checked the numbers, it was somewhere about between 70 and 75%. Most accommodations come at very little to no cost. Um, and I think I hit all the highlights. If I missed something, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Mary. I appreciate that overview. Just a reminder to anyone participating, if you want to go ahead and put a question in the chat, we will address them now for about the next 10 minutes or so. And Mary, we have a first question for you right out of the gate. The question is, do all types of accommodation requests require some type of medical documentation?
So what I think I heard you say is you wanted to know if it's an accommodation is medical necessary. For under accommodation proper, if it's an accommodation, typically you are required to have something medical to validate the need for an accommodation. Now, in the new land that we're in, this COVID pandemic piece, we may not have a note that specifically talks to a disability, right? But you may have that note that says that you're at higher risk, and there's some associated need. That note works in terms of a medical because it usually comes from a provider. However, if providing just increased increasing protocols like PPEs and putting up screens and having one-way traffic and disinfecting and cleaning, if those things put in order and staggering the shifts, if that is seen as compliant, perhaps that may be enough. But if that's not enough in your particular case, if you have an underlying medical concern that might put you at greater risk, then what we would probably do is drill down and see if doctor would provide something that speaks to that specific limitation instead of a broad or general note, because all of us are at risk. But some of us are at greater risk for whatever reason. If it's something that's tied to a comorbidity, meaning associated or concurrent medical issues, doctor may choose to pick one of those out and say, for example, due to the fact that my patient has had recent and invasive treatment, it's my recommendation that they not leave home for so many days or weeks. Then that's a different conversation. Um, that's about as well as I think I can answer that question without something more specific. So, I mean, if you have a more specific question, or if you want to dial in a little bit closer, I'd be happy to try it.
Sure. Thank you, Mary. So we have another question that has come in, and it says, what would you do if your supervisor approves you for equipment accommodations after you've informally begun the interactive process, but your department denies your requests? Are staff limited to accommodations equipment that are only on the pre-approved list? What if your supervisor is aware of needs but isn't beginning the interactive process your department demands, or your department demands a formal request for accommodation?
Okay, that sounded like about 4 or 5 questions.
I know, we got a list. Read back
But well, let's start at the beginning. Okay, so if you're already engaged in an interactive process, and the interactive process is relative to your need for a specific type of equipment, then that conversation continues. If your department denies that equipment as an accommodation, then typically speaking, we have a little bit more to talk about. What would they offer instead? What else might work? But if you're in the process of asking for, let's say, you want to look at a more flexible schedule, and by the way, I might need a desk, those are two different lanes, okay? With regard to furniture and equipment, that may be handled through a different process, and Greg's going to go into that a little bit, but it starts with a self-evaluation under ergonomics, and there are resources for that avenue. It doesn't seem like, at least the way the question was asked, that this is a very clear picture of what's going on. So I might invite you to send me an email and get with me, and let's see what we can work together offline.
Sounds great. Thank you for so well addressing all 4 questions in one go. I'm so impressed I didn't need to repeat. Great. Well, we have just about 2 more minutes or so if anyone has any last questions for Mary before we transition to Lucy.
And there are 2 of us in disability management. Gretchen Scott is my colleague, and she handles part of the campus, which includes administration offices, finance, and a few more. And I have all the academic units, the library, the centers, the museums, and some more. So you could call into the general number, or you can email either of us, and if we're not the contact person, your person of contact, then we will refer you to the appropriate person.
Great. Well, Mary, I think that concludes our Q&A session with you for today. Thank you so much for giving us an overview and addressing some questions.
Thank you.
Excellent. And now we're getting ready to transition to Lucy Greco, who is our web access evangelist at Isnt, which is Information Systems and Technology at UC Berkeley.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, excellent. I can never remember if I'm muted or not muted. So good afternoon. I probably have met some of you before, but as Rachel said, I am the accessibility evangelist for Berkeley, and specifically technology accessibility. I deal with websites and applications, anything that has a technological back end to it, are things I help the campus understand how to make those things accessible. So, for example, I recently worked with Office of the President on negotiating a new contract system-wide for photocopiers to make sure that those photocopiers, as we buy them, become more accessible. I look at applications we're purchasing, and I look at the various tools that we use with our students, that we use in our work, the websites that we create, and the services and tools that we need to access digitally. So that's who I am very quickly. But today I wanted to talk to you about this new world we've come to, you know, the COVID environment. How do we cope with the digital side of that, considering that all of our lives have become very digital, very, you know, we're online all the time now. I don't know about any of you, but frankly, I don't think I have gone a day without 2 to 4 Zoom meetings or Meet meetings. It's just, it's there all the time. Everything we have to do is online. I mean, yes, my job previously was online a lot, but I swear I didn't have this many Zoom meetings. So what I want to talk to you today about is what we need to do to accommodate people in this digital environment. So if you are somebody who's sending out emails, those emails should be formatted in a way that everyone can read them. If you're sending out a departmental email to everyone in your unit, and you provide links in that email, those links need to have really good, clear text telling people where the links are going. Please, please, please do not put click here. Click here is the most offensive link on the internet because a person who is blind or visually impaired does not actually get the information around that link when they're using their links list. And all they see is click here and they don't know where that link will go. So instead of your links saying click here if you are, and then the text around it saying if you are a student, it should be, information for students is the link instead of click here. So that's the number one bugaboo I have for emails. Don't create emails that are just images. If you're sending out flyers to students and staff about events, don't create a PDF image and then the entire email is an image, because that can't be read by a person with a screen reader either. Instead, why not use the text that the image is showing? Why not actually write up something, make that information more, digestible to people as text? You can still use the image as a background, but the text needs to be there as real text. All right, so that's communicating digitally. Now, Zoom meetings. In things like Zoom meetings, and I'm using Zoom meetings generically, we have access to Zoom on campus and we have access to Meet on campus. I find that Google Meet and Zoom are equally accessible. I find that Zoom is better for larger groups of people than Meet. And I find that Meet is actually really quick and simple, down and dirty for 2 to 3 people at most. I really enjoy using both because at least it gives me a little bit of a different interface and I'm not, going into drone mode, but they both really are very accessible. The thing to know about Meet meetings, the reason I don't find them as accessible for larger groups is that when you're in a Meet, there are icons for every single participant. Although Google has done some work to correct this, there's still an awful lot of tabs that a person has to do to get to the different buttons. And not all the functionality in Meet is keyboard accessible. So for example, I can very easily in Zoom share my screen with a keyboard command. I cannot share my screen with a keyboard command in Meet. I have to tab over to the present button. Then I have to, then I can choose the present option from there, but I still have to tab to that control to get to it. Whereas in Zoom, it's literally just a keystroke and I choose my presentation type and I'm done. We have seen many other different platforms used on campus. I would recommend that you check before using any platform that you're thinking of other than Zoom and Meet. Check to see how accessible it is. Do you want to use a WebEx? Do you want to use a GoToMeeting? All these options actually have high accessibility bars. I can't tell you how difficult it is for a person using a screen reader to use WebEx. And I am betting that any of you who've been to a WebEx meeting will probably say, yeah, it's pretty hard to use even for me without a screen reader. Well, that bar gets so much higher when it becomes someone using a screen reader. There are many different types of events now we're holding online that are large streaming type events. So we want to hold something for our department where all the students who are registered in our particular department's programs can attend. You need to make sure whatever you use for that event is accessible. Can it actually accommodate people using a screen reader? Can it include captions? Can it include the ability to have an interpreter? We have a captioner for this particular meeting. I'm hoping that any of you who need that have found that control. The most important thing to know about the captioner is that it takes a little bit of work to get the captioner into the meeting and a little bit of setup. So check ahead of time. Think about these things before your meeting happens. When you send out the invitation for an event, include something in that message that says, if you need accommodations, please let us know. If you need preparation time for that, say, please let us know by X date, which is maybe, 24 to 72 hours before the actual event, so that you can actually prepare and get ready to accommodate that person. Be willing to accommodate the person. Don't use a platform that you've never tested for accessibility and you don't have any idea what its accessibility is. We have a couple of platforms I've looked at here on campus. I'm not going to name names, but there's some of these platforms that people are using for online conferences now that are not accessible. A person with a screen reader can't share the content, can't read what the screen is saying. It's really quite frustrating to me to see that we've gone ahead and held events with these platforms without thinking about the impact of accessibility on the people using those tools. So now that you've got your event, you're ready to go, you've got a speaker, you've got your captioner, your interpreter, whatever the accommodations are people need, we're in a Zoom meeting. How do you make sure that that meeting is as inclusive and as friendly and as accessible as possible while you're holding it? Number one, ask your audience what they need. Determine, that you have somebody in the audience who might need you to speak a little slower. You might need someone in the audience who needs you to describe things on the slides. Explain the images and explain the content of those slides. The only way you're going to know that, because somebody may not have informed you ahead of time, is by checking. Does anybody here need anything special from me during this event? Be willing to take feedback from them at the beginning and throughout the entire event. Being polite and inclusive as participants as well as the presenter. We have a chat in this Zoom meeting, and that chat can be somewhat disruptive to a person using a screen reader. Luckily, Zoom has actually fixed that problem for us. Only recently. I have to tell you, it was really quite disturbing because we were creating a document about etiquette in meetings, and I had put in that document, do not chat during the Zoom meeting, because it is very disruptive, because the screen reader user will not only hear the chat, but they'll hear the speaker, and the two voices gets really confusing. Well, it turns out Zoom is now giving me the ability to turn off the chat. So I don't have to worry about that anymore. They've also given me the ability to turn off the announcement that somebody is leaving or entering the meeting. So that's even more helpful, because the chats weren't as disruptive as people with their poor Wi-Fi connections joining and leaving meetings. They weren't intentionally leaving the meeting, but their Wi-Fi would drop off, and that was it. The meeting would be disrupted for me by that announcement. So Zoom has given me the ability to configure all that and turn all that on and off, which I am so, so grateful for. Zoom meetings are so much more fun now. If you are running a poll in Zoom, read out the question and give people the opportunity and time to answer that poll. If you think that you can answer a poll in under 30 seconds, that's not enough for everyone. Realize that people are going to need a little bit more time to navigate and negotiate those polls. What I found is that multiple question polls are not as accessible as single question polls. So send out a poll question, wait for people to respond, then send out another poll. Don't send out 6 questions in the poll unless you're willing to give the person, 3 to 5 minutes to answer all those questions while everybody else waits. As a person using a screen reader, it's really important for you to know how to turn off and on the voice of your screen reader so that the meeting doesn't hear.
Speech mode beeps. Speech mode talk. Mute button. Mute. Currently unmuted. Oh.
So that would be really disruptive to other people in the meeting if they heard my screen reader. So I just
Speech mode off.
Turn my screen reader off, but I still have the ability to use it and control it. If you do need to chat, and it is really important to use the chat because it's a way to engage with the participants of your meeting, chats should be concise and to the point. Chats should not be right on, thumbs up. Chats should be questions and comments and questions. If I had my speech on and I could hear those chats right now, and there were thumbs up and so forth and praise or I agree, that's just noise. It really is noise. And for someone, say, for example, with ADHD, that little flashing message that keeps coming in as somebody's message is happening, it's disruptive noise and it draws their focus and attention from what the person is saying. Now, we made a conscious decision in this meeting to turn video off, but some participants may actually prefer that you not have video off. And it's really important to think about that. If a person is a little hard of hearing or can read lips, they may need you to turn your video on so that they can see your lips, and that helps them focus on what you're saying in your words. It also helps some people who have difficulty recognizing the voices, understanding. So make an agreement with your participants at the beginning if you want video on or off. But also be aware that some people with poor connections to the internet may not be able to have their video on because the video takes up the bandwidth and makes the meeting much more, choppy and broken up. Other tips for during meetings. If you have slides, those slides should definitely be described if there is important information in them. If it's decorative, you don't need to worry about that. But if, for example, you're showing a chart of spending over the last semester, tell people what that chart shows. You don't have to read off every single number, but you can say this chart shows that in September we spent 10 times more than we spent in October, but November the price started going up again, et cetera, et cetera. Describe the image that the person is seeing. Don't just say, you can see here how our spending was for the semester. Be inclusive in what those slides do. Currently, we cannot, as a screen reader user, see the slides that a person is presenting. However, note that there is some technology that's about to come out that will let us see that. And I will be the first one to test it when it comes available. It's really quite innovative and quite wonderful. So that's what I wanted to talk about, online meetings. But now I wanted to talk about work and getting your work done as a person with a disability and what kind of accommodations you might need that would help you get your work done as a person with a disability. So we all are used to using our laptops. We know I'm not going to talk about the software and things like that that you might need, but maybe you need to think about, you've got your kids at home and there's a lot of screaming and yelling going on all the time. Maybe getting a nice set of noise canceling headphones might help. Maybe, you can't find a separate room, but you have to have meetings. Maybe getting yourself a specific microphone that is directional so that all it picks up is your voice and not whatever else is in the room. All these things are really key and really important. For our sanity and our mental health, it's really important to have a workspace that we're comfortable with and we're happy with. You've got to feel that this is where I work and this is not the place where I, work with my kids on their homework or where dinner is served in the evening. Working on the kitchen table is just not appropriate. Our campus has been really supportive for us with work from home situations. It's amazing how well our campus has stepped up to help us. If you need a chair for home, if you need a table for home, the campus has been providing those once the proper steps and procedures have gone through. I personally worked with Greg back in April and May and have myself a very comfortable workstation from home. It's much better for me. By the time I made it through April in the current COVID situation, I was suffering from a lot of ergonomic issues because, I was just sitting over in the corner in an armchair because that was what I had to do my work in. And it was not, it was fine for a day or two, But 2 months of working from home with COVID, I can tell you how much better it is now that I have an ergonomic workstation. It's so much more effective for me. I had to stop working after, 4 or 5 hours, and I had to take a lot more frequent breaks. Now that I have the ergonomic workstation, I'm forgetting to take my breaks, and that's actually really bad. Don't forget to take your breaks. You need to stand up. You need to walk around. You need to stretch. You need to not sit at your chair. But the only bad thing I've found about having a really good home workstation is that now I could actually be working 9 or 10 hours a day because there's nothing else to do. I mean, how many of you are finding, the end of the day, you're still working because the only thing left to do is go cook dinner, and it's not time to cook dinner yet. It's a boring life being stuck at home. So find some things to do to engage with, be them online or not. Pick up a hobby you can do at home. Do something to keep your mental health, keep yourself sane. One of the things I've really wanted to do is set up a way for campus members to share our COVID recipes that we've all been creating. I am a huge baker and I love to cook. I would love to see other people on campus, now that we're stuck at home and cooking more meals at home. What are you cooking? Find those things and make sure you have a good work-life balance, because frankly, work-life balance is precious, and stuck at home doing our jobs from home really can affect us. I'm one of those people who's going to want to stay working from home when this is done, but I also know that I need to protect my work-life balance, because I am also one of those people that until the job is done, I'm going to keep working, even if it's 7 or 8 o'clock at night. So now I'm going to open the floor for questions. Oh, and sorry, one last resource I have, and this is where you can bring up that slide, Rachel. I work with a committee at UCOP where we've come up with a bunch of resources, and the page that's on this slide is a link to our Zoom accessibility guide. And we are about to update this with the information about how to actually make those settings so that you don't have to hear the chats as a screen reader user. But this is basic etiquette on Zoom, how to have a Zoom meeting that's accommodating and accessible for everyone. And we will be sharing these slides, I believe, after the session. Is that not correct, Rachel and Mark?
I can't speak for Mark, but I'm sure we can make that possible.
Okay, excellent. So you'll be able to find this link. We've also done some other really good resource pages about the tools we can use. So for example, we have a guide on emails that's linked to from the same website. We have a page on using DocuSign, how to create an accessible DocuSign. How many times now have we realized that, oh, wait, we need students to sign things and we don't have, they can't come into our office and sign the paper. We can use DocuSign. We have campus licensing for that. And if there are other tools that you find you're using on a daily basis that you'd like a guide for, please reach out to me. I am L Greco, LGRECO at berkeley.edu, where you can ask me, do you have a guide on how to use X, Y, or Z, or create an accessible X, Y, or Z? And I can definitely give you a hand with that. So questions?
Excellent. Thank you, Lucy. I know I just got up to stretch and do the second part standing, so I appreciate all that I learned. We have a first question. I know we just shared on your slide a link to how to make sure our Zoom is accessible. But our first question says, where can we go on campus to learn about how to make accessible emails, PDFs, and documents? Oh, and I see it was responded to, I think, actually by another participant already. It was linked as www.ucop.edu/electronic-accessibility/index.html.
Yes, and you can also go to Web Access. That's WEBACCESS.berkeley.edu, and we have a pile of resources there on accessibility. And there's just all kinds of tools. UCOP has purchased a bunch of trainings for us from a company called Site Improve. And those trainings include creating accessible communications. There is a training on accessible social media. There is a training on creating PDFs that are accessible. And all of those trainings are in the UC Learning System. However, I highly recommend, instead of using the UC Learning System, I highly recommend that you sign up for Site Improve. And the way you can do that is go to the technology catalog. And I'm sorry, I will share this link to have it added to the slides before we share the slides. But on the service catalog under web services, there is a link to Site Improve. And there's a form there that you can use to sign up for Site Improve and then get into the academy that Site Improve has. And the reason I say it's better to go to the academy is because we're a little behind in keeping the courses up to date in the UC Learning System. But Site Improve improves those courses and increases them. You know, every month or so, they're adding at least 1 or 2 new trainings. So for example, they just added a really in-depth course on how to create accessible flyers and information using Adobe Illustrator, which is a very hard thing to do.
Excellent. We have another question here. It says, thank you, Lucy. Is it appropriate to use hyperlinks for websites that explain what is in the link? For example, a hyperlink that reads, in quotations, the Center for Student Conduct instead of the office's website, or should both be provided?
It's long as the material between the quotation marks is the actual link, that's actually better than the actual URL. You know, if I have to listen to http://office.studentconduct.berkeley.edu, it's a lot more pleasant for me to hear the words Office of Student Conduct. There are some tricks to making sure that that link stands out properly and that it's identifiable. Don't make those links not like just like plain text so that they actually can't be seen to be a link. But no, it's absolutely proper to have the link be the text that describes where it's going. Just click here. Don't want click here.
Excellent. And we have a follow-up. You also mentioned that you wouldn't name names about a few programs you felt weren't accessible. Would you reconsider naming these so that we aren't inadvertently using them?
Hoppin'.
Got it. Excellent. And I see we have another question that just popped in. And it says, thank you for all your recommendations. I was just going to ask for recommendations for students who want to know more about accessibility, but you already gave us a lot. Is there any activities for students to participate in?
So students also can access Site Improve. That's available to everyone on campus. And any students that are interested in learning more about accessibility, I am more than willing to take emails from them and talk to them about accessibility. I would love to start offering more training and resources for students in my copious amounts of free time. But no, I'm always willing to take at least 1 or 2 emails and put students on the right path.
That sounds great. And we got a message that says, thank you so much. I will get in touch with you, with a smiley face and 2 exclamation points.
Excellent.
Great.
And again, my email address is lgreco@berkeley.edu. That's another point I didn't actually make very well, is when you have email addresses and URLs, you should always spell them out to the audience to give people the chance to follow along with you. It's also really important to let people know about features that you have for accessibility. So for example, when you start up a meeting, it's really important to say you may take note that we have captioning available, and you can turn those captions on and off by clicking and then whatever the button is. I can never remember what it looks like. And describe what the difference is if there are differences. You may notice that we have we have an interpreter present. That kind of thing is always, it's very welcoming to your audience. It makes your audience feel that they are important to you.
Excellent. Some great tips. And I just put Lucy's email in the chat as well. And I'm sure that that will be available and accessible to folks following this meeting shortly thereafter. I'll give another minute to see if there's any last questions for Lucy before we go on to our final presentation.
Well, thank you all for coming today. I'm actually going to sign off early because I got double booked, but I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all about, you know, making this new difficult environment just a little easier for some people.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Lucy. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. And now we're get ready.
Sorry.
Oh. No worries. And now we're going to get ready to transition to our final presentation, which is coming from Greg Ryan, who is an ergonomic specialist for Be Well at Work, which is at the Tang Center and part of University Health Services.
Thank you, Rochelle, so much, and really appreciate the invitation. So honored to speak with the panelists. Worked with them for so many years now and on so many different projects. Just really, it's really amazing to be on the cutting edge, or hopefully on the cutting edge. We've been fighting hard and we still have a long way to go. But it's good to know where the resources are at. And Mallory Lynch and myself are the resources for ergonomics on the campus. I work with Mary, she's in disability management. So we both work under Be Well at Work and all the faculty, staff, health programs there. So Mallory is basically at home right now doing remote assessments, and I'm pretty much half the time on the campus and half the time at home doing remote assessments, but there's still many, many ergonomic issues on the campus. And you know, what we try to do is always be proactive, be on the preventative side of injuries and accommodations, but it doesn't always work that way. So I do a lot of return to work, force measurements. We're looking at forces and body positions in ergonomics and biomechanics usually. So trying to educate supervisors on, you know, what is a push-pull of 10 pounds. So looking at things like that. So today we're going to talk about setting up, obviously, ergonomics at home and where we're at right now and kind of where we're going. So we can move on to the next slide. And so most of us are home most of the time at this point. It's not exactly new, but it is ever changing, and the information is always changing. And I think at this point, we understand we're going to be here longer than we think. So it went from, oh, you know, we can deal with this coffee table maybe for a little while, and maybe we can deal with this situation. At this point, like Lucy said very eloquently, it's just not good enough, and it's got to make it right. And if we're going to be working at home this long, we've got to have a really, really good setup. So I want to talk about just the process of going through that and getting that, or, you know, looking at what the needs are. So taking a little deeper dive today, and again, please feel free to, you know, ask questions in the chat that are very, very specific. Because I know things are specific at this point. We really know what's working well, what is not, but things still transition. You know, my child today is doing map testing, and I've been talking to a lot of people, obviously do a lot of evaluations, and there's always an ergonomic component, but I think what Lucy was saying too, there's a lot of other components that aren't quite ergonomics as well. Just, you know, trying to find a dedicated workspace where you are focused and have time to really, you know, get your work done and feel like you're doing something productive. And that's what it's all about. Being productive and comfortable is really what we're trying to do in ergonomics. And so, you know, working around the body, providing it support, movement, is really, really important. That's what we're seeing with the research. I always like to give the update, and again, what we're seeing is we're just not moving as much as we need to. So it's really tough, but the house usually affords us the ability to move, but we are human, and the couch is soft, or places are comfortable, and that's what the research is generally showing, that we're just not moving as much at all. So discuss some ways to get some more movement in our day. And then, we've already talked about a lot of Zoom and ways to decrease that. What we've tried to do is just try to keep everything to a half an hour or less. Just try to change the way we do things a little bit, and the way we deliver trainings. So it's important to look at the research, react to it. And I think that's been really tough in this situation, where you are putting things together, and a lot of times you overlook certain things. So we need to be a little bit more up to date on a lot of this stuff. So next slide, please. So what we're trying to look for, at this point at home, is really emulating what we had in the workplace. I think most of us at this point in our life had a pretty decent setup at our work, and really we want to make that as similar as possible back at the home. And that usually requires some ergonomic equipment. Usually my go-to is, really postural support, ergonomic chair, and adjustable desks that can fit most everybody. And that really goes into the design of the human body and furniture, and trying to fit those two. So what we try to do is get furniture, and that was a real challenge at the beginning, just to try to get furniture to the house safely, put together, so people don't have to put it together. So that was a real challenge. Right now we have things set up really, really well. We have access to a lot of good furniture and shapes and sizes to accommodate many, many different shapes and sizes and situations. So, really, really good equipment. It fits a lot of people, can fit most anybody. And then, also we have other options that we can go to in terms of ergonomic needs, that we can fit 100% of the population. We generally have worked really hard to get things to people's doors completely assembled. So there's no, having to move in and out over stairs. And then we do also have options for white glove service, where people will bring it in and place it and set it up. So trying to figure out all the different steps of just getting the right equipment safely to the client, and try to support the postures. So with the furniture, there's behaviors as well. And, like Lucy said, and other people, you got to move, and it's really, really hard. And they say, like, the research is not showing that, but the research out of Cornell is, for every half-hour period, for maximum human performance for, most people, 20 minutes of sitting, 8 minutes of standing, 2 minutes of moving. And that's really hard to do. And I always say, it's research and then there's reality. But we want to keep things in mind. We have to move more, and just even standing up, and we have to do it during this long presentation. We have to move a little bit. So even doing a few squats or so, and just doing some movements with your arms, some shoulder rolls, squeezing between your shoulder blades, all helps a little bit. Next slide, please. So when we're going into setting up our workstation, I think it's really, really important. I think everyone's kind of preached the same thing. It's important to have that conversation with your supervisor, disability management, your doctor, your physical therapist. Really know what the needs are, and the specifics. The more specific we can get, the better we can accommodate and figure out what the needs are. Always go to kind of the basics of just having a separated keyboard, mouse from the monitor. Working off a laptop, the last time I saw the research on that, it's about an hour a day safely, which again is tough, research and reality, but shows you how dangerous they are. Because when your hands are in the right place, your neck is looking down, or it's just really impossible to work ergonomically with a laptop for long periods of time. So you're going to need some kind of equipment, maybe some IT support, maybe some other kind of assisted technology support. So, figure out the needs, and we can kind of put it together. So a lot of times there's monitors, other types of devices, monitor arms, things to, make things move. A lot of things are available. We'll talk more about that. What I do like about the house, people are comfortable there, but we do need to find that, get different stations of areas. So we want one primary workstation, like Lucy mentioned, where we're set up really, really well. Unfortunately, at my house, it's not really working that way at this point, where I'm getting kind of pushed around a little bit with my family. So I usually end up standing longer than I really like to, and having to use some fatigue mats, anti-fatigue mats with a yoga mat, and try to move a little bit more. But that's kind of how the way it goes these days. You got to kind of make it work for you, and it works. But you definitely want that postural support, get everything to the right height. So the keyboard and mouse, wrist straight, elbows are by the side. So you're in a really, really good position, head's balanced over the shoulders. And then you're able to move to different positions if at all possible. So you want to keep the options open. And we'll talk about ways to set these up in the next slide. So here's kind of our basic setup. I think we're looking for more than this at this point, but here's just kind of the basics. We're not working with a lot here, but we're trying to still get things to the right height at least. So the keyboard and mouse right at elbow height. A lot of time the furniture, the things at the house, the dining tables, they're really too high for most of us, since they're made for the 95th percentile male. So we have to maybe boost ourselves up with some cushions. And I think most people looking for an ergonomic chair at this point, something that height adjustable and provides better postural support. Footrest is often needed. You always go to the yoga mat. A rolled up yoga mat sometimes works well. Boxes, old binders, stuff around the house. But like I said, at this point, we're very kind of be a little bit more specific and get better chairs. Next slide, please. So when we do our assessments, and that's where we try to figure out what's the best kind of chair for your posture and postural support, and just to go through all the different adjustments and all the possibilities. Now we can get most things to people depending on what they need. So many different options of chairs. We're lucky to have really, really good contracts with ergonomics equipment carriers, so we can fit everybody with different types of foot support, cylinder heights, shapes of chairs, different fabrics, cushionings, extra lumbar support. It's kind of amazing what they can do with chairs, but there's different cutouts, obviously no arms. What we've really tried to do, and we've noticed, is that obviously people don't have a ton of room at the house. So we've tried to get, go smaller with our basic chairs, and find good chairs at lower prices that are a little bit smaller, that still provide good postural support. But like I said earlier, at this, we really try to get it, as good as it can get at this point. If you're going to be there a long time, you want to make sure you have exactly what you need. So doing the evaluation with Mallory or myself, we can do it via Zoom and identify, what you had at the office. If a lot of people have taken that or worked out some way, or just replicating that at home. And every situation is different. Every department is different. So we can just navigate that and see where we can provide the accommodation of the right products. Next slide, please. So this is myself, again, working through the different types of input devices. And, for the basics, a lot of people can use their laptop a lot. And what I tend to do is use an HDMI cord and just plug that into an old TV or an old monitor or something like that. I think at this point, a lot of people have their monitors or have something, but an HDMI cable and a TV can get you by, because a lot of times the visual issues are really, really difficult, especially as we age, and we got to get the visual target correct, whatever that needs to be. So a lot of times building that up, sometimes with a laptop lifter. So that picture on the right there is a laptop lifter on the left side. Get the screens at the right height so the neck can be in the right place. And again, elbows right by the side, nice and relaxed and good support. Next slide, please. Really important to have a standing station if you need one. It's good a lot of times to look at the kitchen or some type of kitchen counters because they tend to be a better height for standing. You can prop those up with maybe a little bit of a box. A lot of times game boxes work, or jigsaw puzzle boxes, something that are a little bit larger that can support the keyboard and mouse, get them at the right height, again, elbow height. Sometimes the raising the screen up again is essential, getting that right about eye height. It's a lot of times it's not perfect when you're standing, but you're here for such short periods of time, usually 10, 15 minutes, an hour. And I always try to listen to my body, try not to stand for too long, but it's good to keep moving the feet as well, stagger your stance, and again, movement's the key. But it's good to figure out some place in the house, if you don't have the standing table, to figure out a way to stand for at least part of the hour. Next slide, please. So with my daughter here, so like I said, over time, a little standing station, having a yoga mat to reduce that fatigue on the feet, putting a leg up and changing the foot position often, as you can see on the left there on the bottom part. The staggered stance helps take some pressure off the low back, helps your posture. Again, a lot of times we need a lot of screens, setting those up at the right height. So again, good neck posture. Lucy mentioned it before, noise canceling headsets. Unfortunately, usually got to spend a decent amount of money, but you get what you pay for. And it's really, really important sometimes to blanket those things out, have a good connection. Also affords you to move around a little bit during your meetings, so you don't have to look directly at the Zoom and talk directly into a microphone. So I think that does afford better posture. Again, using things around the house for trying to create a standing station. Ironing boards are fantastic. They're adjustable. You can get them to the right height. So be creative. A lot of times, it's been really tough getting the equipment. It's been 4 to 6, 8-week wait time sometimes on tables. So you got to sometimes figure out something in the meantime before your equipment arrives. Next slide, please. So again, a few different alterations here on standing. Again, I had problems. I stand probably too long during the day, so I do feel the feet, especially on the hardwood. So I've switched over to the anti-fatigue mat on the picture there on the left. And again, the kitchen works pretty well. And again, you can mix it up. Like I said, on the left side there, you can see me using the input devices from the laptop and just using that into a larger screen. And the opposite is true on the right side there, where he's using external keyboards and mouse and using the laptop screen. It both work. What we try to do is provide a lot of flexibility and different options, and sometimes it works better for people, either or. Next slide, please. So in terms of the table options, we always get tables, and we get complaints on it that they're expensive, and we know that they have to have the right height so they fit everyone. Even though it's going, I know, probably usually to one person's house, but we still want to have the quality, make sure that it goes through all the testing, the electrical, jump through all the correct hoops that as a public university, we just have to do, and it was the right thing to do. So they are a little bit more expensive. We're always looking for better prices, but to get the right equipment that fits all people, that's kind of what it needs to do. So we look for maximum flexibility and adjustability, really thin top, so it's easy access underneath, a lot of leg clearance. And there's a lot of different options for tables, especially now that we have things have opened up in terms of delivery, but shapes, sizes. I've done a lot of bi-levels in the houses, where that front section there on that picture on the bottom right can tilt back or forth. So there are a lot of options in task lighting, monitor arms. And during the evaluation, we can kind of address any of those issues. I have put casters on desks for easy mobility or moving around the house. I've done adjustable tables as small as 29 by 24 inches. So some interesting things to fit tables into tight spaces in houses and to work with what people have. So I think this is what we generally recommend, is getting something that can afford a proper sitting and standing situation and make it as comfortable as it can be. Next slide, please. But as we know, this is reality, and we do sometimes get to the couch. I know I unfortunately have to get here sometimes, and it's one of those places that catches up to you. You don't really feel uncomfortable until you stand up or move a little bit, and then you feel it in your hips. But these left two positions here with your trunk really leaning forward and hips really flexed, it's a really tough position on the low back and the hip flexors. And for a lot of us, it's a real dangerous area to flare up. So we want to watch out and stay away from the couch as much as possible. And next slide, please. And if we do get there, we want to provide some support, so take a little bit of time, put some pillows down, especially in that low back, a little bolster back there, roll up a towel. Need to get that, try to maintain those curves of the low back and the upper back, some kind of back support about shoulder blade level. And again, where the head is balanced over the shoulders, elbows by the sides, wrists are nice and straight. But again, I wouldn't be at this position for too long. We have to be careful on the couch. All right, next slide, please. Some other workstations and big picture here, like the one on the left there, and I see this a lot because everything is very high in the house, a lot of the work surfaces, and we see a lot of unsupported positions. So I know what happens if you're here. It's a good time to work on your posture for maybe 5 to 10 to 15 minutes, depending how strong you are, but not too many people can hold these positions for very long. So these are not safe, but you do get there. It is, and it's good to work on your posture from time to time in an unsupported position, kind of sitting on a stool or high in a chair. But it's kind of like sitting on like an exercise ball, and that was a rage for a while. And we had to fight that one. But it's good for working on your posture, but for very, very short periods of time. So watch out for these. Next slide, please. So taking a deeper dive into input devices, I know we spent a lot of time here with clients, and we have our standard devices available, but there are a lot of alternative devices in the world and a lot of different options out there. So usually that starts the process, and if something in our normal selection doesn't work, we are able to go out there and find different devices like roller mice, things that may be, outside the bell curve, data hand keyboards, left or right-handed keyboards. There's a lot of different devices out there on the market. So all devices can fit a lot of people, but there's definitely abilities to fit 100%. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the lighting, and this is always a difficult one for ergonomists, and it's even tougher at home, and it's even tougher with the Zoom. So just, we've seen a ton of eye issues lately. So digital eye syndrome, just sitting there looking at the screen for too long, whether it doesn't really matter what kind of screen it is, anything that's bright and two-dimensional is not good. Eyes start slowing down, the blink rate, muscles tend to tense up, so eyes dry out, muscles get tight. It does distort the eye over time and cause issues. So again, it's easier said than done to take breaks, and but you have to just go with the research. And there's the 20-20-20 rule. So the research out there is for every 20 minutes, take a 20-second break and look at something at least 20 feet away. So the rule of thumb is try to change that focal length of your eyes often. So that's again good to move around and good to change your visual pattern. But you also have to be careful about where you're looking. And unfortunately, I think this is one of those places where what we like to do is not good for us. So that picture there in the upper right hand, where you have that nice greenery behind your MacBook there, not good for the eyes. It might look pretty, but it's really tough on that transition. So when you go look outside into a really bright outside from the screen, really, really tough on the eyes. So it's one of those things where you always want to have, you don't want to have light behind your monitor, and you don't want to have light in front of your monitor. So you're going to either get glare or direct sunlight. So you want to use the blinds, try to control the light as much as possible, but the light fluctuates throughout the day. It's tough to control the light in the house. So we've just seen a ton of issues there. So the more you can control it, the better. So you might have to use some task lighting, different types of lighting, get the visual light correct. But again, a lot of it goes down to duration and work habits with this, and moving the neck, having the right support, and taking the breaks. Next slide, please. So onto the breaks, and I think not to harp on about it, but I think what you're seeing is this kind of pattern with 20 minutes, and that's what we've been really clear on in terms of a lot of our training, and even at a system-wide level, looking at how quick things, and giving people more time actually, but also making things shorter and the ability and giving people flexibility there. But we're seeing this thing at 20 minutes, and it does make sense in terms of concentration, your visual. After about 20 minutes, in terms of your metabolic pathway, that shifts. In terms of muscles, about 20 minutes. So if a stretched muscle, if there's oxygen deprivation, you start to see issues. Where there's tensile strength there. So you start to see issues after about 20 minutes of not moving, not changing. So I think we need to be wary of that and do the best we can. We can't be perfect. There's no perfect posture. What we try to do is just get to the next posture, and try to use the right tools. And that's where I think a lot of the evaluations go to. What tools do you need? A lot of them might be different types of software, voice recognition software. So we just have to identify, what the needs are. RSI Guard is a fantastic break reminding software. I use it a lot when people come back on restrictions. They have to monitor exactly how much computer work they're doing. It can pick up on that. It can remind you to take breaks. It can tell you when to sit and stand. It's very, very robust. It can also get really, really annoying, but it is good for behavior, and a lot of it is behavior. Having the right equipment, and then backing that up with using the equipment properly, and taking the breaks, and then doing what we need to do physically and mentally, and that's not easy. So I hate to be Captain Obvious there, but just want to give the latest research and where we're at and what the resources are. And so that's kind of where we are with the break. So I know it's tough, but try to do the best you can. Next slide. So where we are in terms of the ergonomic program, I think most people have, gone through most of the steps at this point. But if you haven't, I would just reach out to Mallory and myself, for an evaluation, and, start there and figure out what the needs are. But you could always go to our website, the Be Well at Work website, for the latest on the COVID situation. I think, through the past, 7 months, the ergonomic offerings have changed a lot, just of what's been available. So now we have a lot more chairs, tables available. So just started with an ergonomic evaluation. So I think get very specific quickly. That's where we want to go at this point. Next slide, please. And next slide, you can just jump there. So these are kind of the basic peripherals for working at home. Like I said, there's kind of just basic keyboards, mice, HDMI cables, wrist rests, foot rests, some cushions. But again, at this point, I definitely recommend chairs. So if we can go outside the standard list for any accommodation. Next slide. So other resources, like I said, that's where to go. So Be Well at Work, our faculty staff health program page. That'll see all the up-to-date COVID resources, all the trainings that are up to date, and then all the other resources that are for you. I think we mentioned earlier, but employee assistance, disability management, have a robust wellness program. Nutrition is a really big, has a big component a lot of times to ergonomic injuries. Just as well as movement, stretching, work-life balance, financial information about childcare. So a lot of good stuff going on. It does take some effort connecting the dots. I think that's what we're all doing here. So, connect the dots. Please reach out, ask for evaluations, ask for help. Let us know what you need. We're always here to assist. I think that's about all I have for you today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Greg, for that comprehensive overview. Well, we've just finished our last panelist, but I do want to honor and give just a little bit of time if anyone has any specific questions for Greg on anything we've gone over today, anything that we can answer now. And I'll just let you know while I'm giving you a few moments to type out your questions if you have any, that this recording will be posted on the Alliance website, which is https://org.berkeley.edu/staff-organizations/SADA. And it will also include all the discussed URLs. Excellent. I'll just give us just another minute or so. I know I popped away a few times during your talk to grab some pillows for my back to make sure I had my proper posture situated.
Yeah, people always sit up when I walk in the room. It's just one of those things.
That's kind of a fun effect to have on people. All right. Well, I don't see any questions popping at this time, and it makes sense. It was such a thorough and clear overview. But Greg, I want to thank you for joining us today and giving us such a great presentation.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate the invitation. Thanks.
Excellent. Well, we'll just stop our sharing for now that we're at the conclusion of our presentation. And really quickly, I just want to give a final thank you to Derek, Mary, Lucy, and Greg for giving us such wonderful information today, and for all of you who joined in video, audio, chat-wise to make this conversation a really great one. So I hope you all take care, enjoy yourselves, be well, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.